Media This Sunday, a very special program as we talk live to two of Donald Trump's former campaign managers, Kellyanne Conway and Corey Lewandowski. This as the media coverage of the transition turns white hot on several fronts, with pundits pouncing on Trump's approach to the CIA and Russia.
So now the incoming commander-in-chief is going to war with the CIA, which dared conclude that Russia intervened with the campaign with the intention of helping Trump win.
And the party is now trapped. It's got this president-elect who is deeply compromised by Russia.
Now Democrats and the abusively biased alt-left mainstream media, they're pushing the CIA's assessment as an undeniable fact. But of course, you need to know the truth. It is not.
And Trump canceling a news conference on avoiding future conflicts with his business empire.
Donald Trump failing to meet his own self-imposed deadline for explaining how he plans to separate himself from his business empire.
No plan yet on how our next president might try to keep, say, foreign governments from leveraging his private business interests against him and his family in order to get the United States government to do stuff that it might not otherwise do. I can wait till next month.
What about the commentators actually urging GOP members of the Electoral College to dump Trump? And aides saying they may well change or curtail the daily White House press briefings. Would the media go haywire over that? Plus, the journalist who was fired for tweeting something unspeakable about Donald Trump and his daughter Ivanka. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. We begin this morning with the woman who has become the face of the presidential transition. Kellyanne Conway, Donald Trump's former campaign manager, joins us now from his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me start with something that a New York Times news story said was false. Donald Trump tweeted the other day, if Russia or some other entity was hacking, why did the White House take so long to act? Why did they only complain after Hillary lost? But the National Intelligence Director, James Clapper, did say in October, did formally accuse the Russians of hacking during the campaign. So how do you reconcile those two statements?
They are easily reconcilable. I mean, let's look at President Obama's own final press conference on Friday, Howie. He stopped short of saying that Russian hacking actually interfered in the election in a way that switched the election results toward Hillary Clinton. He was unwilling to do that, which puts the president himself at odds with many in his party. I would say even Hillary Clinton now is telling donors at her party or wake, whatever you want to call it, the other night in Manhattan, that Russian hacking affected the election results. No, it did not. And she knows that. She ignored Wisconsin. She ignored Michigan, which President Obama won by 10 points 4 short years ago, and right. Donald Trump just won.
Well, I don't suggest.
So, look, if the intelligence community wants to be serious about this and produce evidence to the American people, we, of course, will look at that. They were invited to a House intelligence briefing and didn't show up. They'd rather leak to the media. That should bother people who are running around on their high horses, beating their chest, saying that they are genuinely concerned about not undermining our democracy.
Yeah,
Come forward, go and testify where you should behind closed doors, and stop leaking to the media.
And no question the fact that these leaks have really added to the murkiness surrounding this rather than on-the-record statements from administration officials. You went off on White House spokesman Josh Earnest the other day after he said, well, look, Trump obviously knew during the campaign the Russians were hacking the DNC emails, that this was hurting Hillary's campaign, and even that Trump had invited Russian hackers to find her deleted emails. So why did you respond so strongly to Earnest?
Representing the White House from the podium, how he would say that he knew what Donald Trump knew and that Donald Trump obviously knew it. How does he know that? And in fact, it was his own president, his own boss, President Obama, the next day coming out and saying, look, I told Vladimir Putin to, quote, cut it out or knock it off at some international conference, and he did. But, you know, when Donald Trump made that comment tongue-in-cheek about going and getting her emails, Podesta's emails were already in the main. And I would point out for your viewers, because nobody talks about it for many reasons, it was a pro-Hillary outside group that used Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State's hacked emails, to try to help her in this election. That he questioned Benghazi, and they tried to cherry pick some of his emails to make it seem that to help her. Although, unfortunately for her, Colin Powell had made criticisms of his successor, Hillary Clinton at state. But, we just can't have it three different ways because people can't get over these election results. Vladimir Putin had nothing to do with the fact that Hillary Clinton underperformed with union households, underperformed with women as the first female president, certainly underperformed with white voters, underperformed with the Obama constituency.
Okay, no need
and
to
look, let me just say
election.
something else. Oh, go ahead, please.
All right, let me just turn, and you can come back to that, but I want to turn to the lead story in the Washington Post today. Last-ditch bid to upend vote. This, of course, is about the formality of the Electoral College meeting tomorrow, and two pretty respected columnists at the Washington Post, E.J. Dionne on the left and Kathleen Parker on the center-right, have embraced the idea of GOP electors going rogue to block or overturn Donald Trump's victory. What do you make of that and all the coverage that this is getting?
Well, rather listen to people who aren't the electors, I would go and look at the quotes of the electors. They're in many different publications this week and weekend, Howie, where it's any combination of I will respect the will of the voters in this state that voted for Donald Trump and giving him all the electoral votes in that particular state. In some states, there's a penalty if you don't abide the will of the voters, and other people knowing that this is just one last ditch effort, very desperate gasp to turn around the election results and make them what everybody said they were going to be, because they totally missed this election. They totally missed the data that were obvious, and they totally missed who America is and what they want in their presidency. I would note you've got these sort of out-of-work actors and actresses embarrassing themselves this week. One guy played the president on a drama called The West Wing. He's not the president going to the West Wing. That's Donald Trump. So it's getting a little out of hand.
Talking here about Martin
I think
Sheen,
what they're trying to do is disrespecting, well, you can mention his name, but look, they're disrespecting and undermining democracy more than any other allegation because they're actually trying to do this. But people talk about this every 4 years. We're not worried about it because we take everything like that very seriously.
It's a non-story.
Our attorneys are, it's a non-story. By the way, it wasn't a squeaker, folks. Get over it. He needed 270 electoral votes. We got a 36 cushion in there, 306, not a squeaker.
Let me try to get some other topics in our remaining time. Republican spokesman Sean Spicer, working with you all, says your team is looking at whether there's still going to be a need for daily White House press briefings. Maybe they don't need to be televised. I understand the arguments, but isn't that the one chance that reporters get every day to try to get answers to questions from a top administration official?
Look at the last couple of press secretaries. They have the daily briefings, but they don't necessarily answer the questions, do they? I mean, some of these people are deflecting and denying, but there are many ways to communicate with the press, and obviously many ways for the press to communicate with us. You've got a president-elect who's very powerful on Twitter. People criticize him, but boy, do they cover every single tweet he puts out there, and boy, does it move mountains, literally and figuratively. But look, this is Donald Trump, unconventional candidate, no military political experience. America looked at that as a bonus. He's going to shake up Washington. It could be an unconventional White House, but we will be respectful to the press. We just expect the same in return. Frankly, for most of them, we're yet to see it.
Speaking of communicating with the press, I mean, Donald Trump used to routinely criticize Hillary Clinton for going months without a press conference. He has not held a news conference since July. Is that going to change anytime soon?
Perhaps. But we used to like to smoke her out to have press conferences because they were so awful. We just thought it helped us if she actually had them. No, everybody was focused on the wrong point there.
All right. The record will show that your answer was perhaps. Real quickly, New York Times columnist Paul Krugman wrote the following on Twitter. There was, rightly, he says, a cloud of illegitimacy over Bush, George W. Bush, dispelled wrongly by 9/11, creates some interesting incentives for Trump. Donald Trump called Krugman demented on this. What's your reaction to that kind of rhetoric?
That kind of rhetoric has no place in our democracy, frankly, no place in media, and here's why. He is taking on the President of the United States and accusing him of doing something or thinking in a certain way that's not just false, but it's dangerous. And I would ask everybody in the media, do you have editors anymore? What are the standards here? Whether you look at people's Twitter feeds, which are a hot mess against the president-elect and inaccurate and really just for other journalists, frankly, the public doesn't read them much. Or you have columnists who clearly wanted a different election result, accusing the president of something. That's just very dangerous to our democracy. And I would say for everybody who's beating their chest and all high-minded about undermining our democracy, they should think about these hot words. I would like for him to apologize, but I would also like for the New York Times to get their arms around this and say, is this an appropriate way to speak about the president-elect?
All right, we'll see if Paul Krugman apologizes. And finally, Kellyanne, in our remaining minute, you've said that one reason that you've been reluctant to take a job in the White House, you have turned down the job of press secretary, we don't know if you're going to take some other position, is that you have 4 children between the ages of 7 and 12. Well, some female critics in the name of feminism kind of jumped on you and accusing you of saying that no mother with children should ever work in the White House.
I lost him.
Have
Tell
you
me
still
when to
got-
answer and I will. I know what he's asking.
Go ahead.
Keep going, Howie.
Okay. The
I lost you
criticism-
for a second, but I think you're asking about, right, well, some of them are childless, so I appreciate their non-advice. And for others who felt the need to tell us all about their breastfeeding schedule, that's weird. I did that 4 times, but don't need to share the details. Look, these are personal decisions. At the core of feminism is supposed to be that we all make our own choices privately and deliberately, whatever's best for us and our families. And by the way, for some people, families include elderly relatives or siblings who need them, who maybe are ill. It's not always children, and I'm respectful of that. But I want to put this to rest in this way. I work for a man, President-elect Donald Trump, Vice President-elect Mike Pence, who are incredibly supportive and are creating a very family-friendly White House and West Wing for any working mother who would like to be there. This is just a personal decision based on the ages and the needs of my own children. But if I go inside, I'm completely confident that I will be respected, that I won't have to pretend that I don't have children. And a lot of women out there in our workforce of over 300 million Americans, Howie, don't have that same privilege. They simply don't. You see a lot of people in corporate America have these handbooks. We're family friendly. And the minute you try to go to a dance recital or a baseball game, they say, oh, it's not listed on page 862.
Yeah. All right. Everyone
Donald
should make
Trump
their
has
own.
working daughters-in-laws, and he respects this.
Everyone should make their own choices. I'm going to agree with that. On that note, Kellyanne Conway, thanks very much for joining us from Mar-a-Lago.
Thank you.
Good to see you. When we come back, why are some top commentators embracing the nutty idea, as we just talked about, that members of the Electoral College should just dump Trump? And later, Corey Lewandowski on why he thinks the New York Times broke the law and his tumultuous tenure at CNN. Members of the Electoral College vote tomorrow, and some pundits are embracing this crazy scheme that Republican electors could go rogue and deny Donald Trump the presidency. He's getting a lot of coverage. Joining us now to analyze the coverage of this issue and the rest of the transition, Aaron McPike, political commentator and a former reporter for Real Clear Politics. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. And Julie Roginski, a Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor. Molly, I was rather surprised, I mentioned this with Kellyanne, to see E.J. Dionne and Kathleen Parker, Washington Post columnist, embrace this crazy town scheme that the electors, in what's always a formality, should basically go rogue and deny Donald Trump the victory he won at the polls.
It really shows the problem when you have columnists that don't represent a lot of diversity at your newspaper. This is a problem not just at the Post, but at the New York Times. Not a single one of their columnists is Trump supportive. And so you see these kinds of theories taking hold and people covering something that really doesn't deserve a lot of coverage. And it's not just columnists, too. The front page, above the fold, lead story of the Washington Post today is all about the Electoral College.
Right.
Nobody really thinks there's going to be any chance that this will go, that more than a couple electors will go away.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
And the story itself admits that, so why are you covering it?
If Hillary Clinton had won a close election, Julie, and Trump diehards are trying to peel off electors against her, the mainstream media would go insane.
Well, but if you think about what the Electoral College is there for, it is specifically in existence for a scenario like this. It's not, doesn't mean it's going to happen. It means that it can potentially happen. Otherwise, we'd have a direct democracy where the popular vote recipient would win. In that case, Hillary Clinton would win.
And wouldn't this take away, invalidate the votes of the 60 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump?
I'm not disagreeing with you whatsoever.
Yeah,
I'm just
you're
saying,
the mechanism
is there. So why not cover it, potentially something that's there? Otherwise, why even have the Electoral College? Abolish it and let's go with the popular vote.
Well, that's a different debate, popular vote versus the 200, getting to 270. But if it is such a crackpot scheme, why is it getting so much coverage and the lead story in a lot of places?
Well,
today?
yeah. There is one elector who has suggested that he will not.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
So it's worth covering because somebody has suggested he's going to buck the system.
Well, who cares what one person does?
Sure, but still, it's worth a little coverage because there is this scheme.
A little coverage, sure.
And these columnists have a platform to kind of say whatever they want. So fine. What's good about it is that this is an American civics lesson which the public needs, because people groan about this every 4 years. So it's worth talking about. The Constitution was written to be amended, so why not have the debate?
Because the press is not covering it as a civics lesson. The press, including some, Pulitzer Prize winning columnist, says this should happen. Now, let me just go slide now to Donald Trump was supposed to have a news conference this week. He decided to cancel it. He wasn't ready to talk about how he's going to deal with his business empire and avoid conflicts of interest, turning it over to at least to Eric and Don Jr. Absolutely legitimate subject for the press, Molly Hemingway, but the press also doesn't seem to acknowledge that there's no easy solution here. It's not like just selling a bunch of stocks.
Unlike almost every other story that's out there, this is the legitimate story that deserves a lot of coverage. And what it deserves is not just this freaking out and constantly hostile coverage, but really an understanding of how complicated it is, how there aren't really any good answers. No matter what happens, there'll be some downsides and some upsides. This is a story we would have been dealing with either way. If Hillary Clinton had won, she also planned to turn over her foundation, which has a ton of foreign conflicts, to her only child. And I just can't imagine that we would have seen the same tenor of coverage where it's constant outrage.
There's also a lot of media focus on Trump's children, and particularly Ivanka, who may play a role in the administration. And she sat in on a meeting with tech executives. So is coverage fair or unfair?
Well, it's fair because he knew what he was getting into, right?
Yeah.
It was always going to be, as Molly pointed out, it was never going to be easy, but that's not our problem. That's the problem that he has. There's an emoluments clause that he's potentially in danger of violating if he doesn't divest himself fully of all of his holdings, especially abroad. And that's something, whether it's complicated or not, it's not something the American people need to deal with. It's something he needs to deal with, or else don't run for president. Absolutely
legitimate, but at the same time, Molly says there's sort of an underlying tone of this is terrible, sort of outrage. I mean, this is a very rich guy everybody knew that when he was elected president.
The problem with pushing off the press conference is simply that the press is going to go digging, and it's going to lead to many more negative stories until he actually has a press conference saying what he's going to do.
So the more there are unanswered questions, the more the press will stir the pot. That's kind of the way the media operates.
By the way, I'm still waiting for Melania Trump's big press conference on her immigration status that we were promised, I think, over the summer. I don't know when that's coming.
Well, they did put out some documents on that. I got to get a break. Stay put. Panel up next. If the Trump White House curtailed those daily briefings, would that be bad news for the public or just the press corps? And later, the journalist who floated the idea that the president-elect might have committed incest just got a new job.
Finished. You wouldn't want your painter to quit partway.
Think you missed a spot.
So when it comes to pain relievers, why put up with just part of a day? Aleve. Live whole, not part.
You want this color over the whole house.
It's Empire Today's biggest sale, the 50-50-50 sale. 50% off carpet and flooring, 50% off padding and materials, and 50% off installation.
800-588-2300 Empire.
Today.
The ultimate destination isn't the end of the journey. It's the moments you cherish along the way. Slow down in the Florida Keys and Key West.
Hey guys! We got you something for being a carpool driver. Happy holidays.
Wow. Thanks. I can totally use this.
WeatherTech floor liners are the ultimate way to protect your vehicle, front, back, and even up the sides. Order the perfect holiday gift today at WeatherTech.com. The ultimate protection for your vehicle. Happy holidays from WeatherTech.
This is Peloton, the indoor cycling experience designed to happen in your home. Only Peloton allows you to take high-energy live and on-demand studio cycling classes without having to go anywhere. Ride live with some of the best studio cycling instructors in the country. Ride flexible with thousands of...
Donald Trump's advisors are warning that they view the daily White House press briefings as antiquated and may make major changes. Here's Trump and GOP spokesman Sean Spicer.
Would you advocate for daily presidential or White House press briefings for the White House press corps?
Well, I think we have to look at everything. And so I don't know that they need to be daily. I don't know that they all need to be on camera.
Aaron McPike, are daily briefings at the White House important not just for the press corps, but for the public to get questions answered?
They might be, but look, White House reporters can go ask questions any time of the day that they're at the White House. They can walk behind the podium and go into the White House communications office and ask questions directly. It may lead to better journalism if reporters go ask questions individually so they don't tip off what they're writing about to other
Well,
reporters.
nobody talks about an exclusive story in the briefing, but you say they can just walk in. I mean, it is hard, and especially if you're not from one of the big newspapers or networks, to get access even to the top press staff, certainly to the policymakers in the White House. The press briefing on camera, isn't that a way of holding an administration accountable?
It is, but why not have a briefing just when there is a big news event that everyone wants to go ask questions of? You know, I do think this could turn away from pack mentality journalism. I'm not saying that they should get rid of the daily press briefings, but thinking about why we have them and why they could do it a different way is worthwhile.
You better go check your Twitter feed, Molly.
Yeah.
Well, again, when the Trump people started saying this, you got a lot of reflexive hostility to the idea. But I agree. I think there is an opportunity to shake things up. What reporters need to focus on is making sure there's a lot of transparency and flexibility, getting the information they need. I don't see these daily press briefings doing a great job with that. Now, I don't know exactly how to change it because it's very important to get it during this administration. But a lot of what happens on these televised briefings is that you have reporters sort of posturing, trying to look good as they ask a question. They don't do a good job tag teaming to get an answer out of anything. And so I would like for everybody to just kind of rethink it and see how it can work out best for both parties.
The briefings have been televised since Mike McCurry and the Clinton White House put them on camera 20 years ago. And sure, it does turn it into political theater, and you do have reporters who want to ask a tough question that they can replay on their newscast. And the press secretaries also know that they're going to get one or two sound bites. But still, you know, in the era of cable news and 24-hour news, isn't there something constructive about that?
Well, it's constructive in the sense that you don't get to choose to go on your favorite news channel where the pundit that you happen to agree with is going to ask you questions that you would love to answer and avoid answering questions that you don't want to answer, asking questions you don't want to answer. And the nice part about this is as transparent as it gets. You get to meet the press, and to the point where, well, you only do it when you have big news events. You don't really know if there's a big news event going on unless you ask the question. It's not the White House. Both parties and both sides aren't necessarily going to start waving a flag saying, wait, we're covering something up, or there's a big news event going on, unless reporters have the opportunity to ask them about it. And that's the best.
It's also a way for an administration to drive a message. And at the same time, if they're ducking, you know, there's news every day to be asked. If they're ducking a direct answer, people get to see that.
That's true. Now, to Kellyanne Conway's point, Donald Trump does go on Twitter and make news that way every single day.
This
so
means we don't get to question him.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, again, I'm not saying that they should go away. I'm saying think about the fact that there is a pack mentality, and this could drive it away from that. And you see White House reporters complain all the time that they get spoon-fed news.
Yeah.
This might drive it away from that.
Yeah, well, nobody forces them to go to these briefings. All right, getting another break. We'll see you all a little later. Coming up, Trump's first campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, on coverage of the transition and why he thinks the editor of the New York Times should go to jail. And later, Steve Hayes, the new editor of the Weekly Standard, on the role of a conservative magazine in the Trump era. Corey Lewandowski has been one of Donald Trump's fiercest defenders, first as his original campaign manager and later as a CNN commentator. He's now an outside advisor to Trump, free to speak his mind, and he joins me now from Manchester, New Hampshire. Corey, good morning. Let me start with something you said at Harvard that caused a bit of ridicule in the press. Quote, quoting you now, "This is the problem with the media. You guys took everything that Donald Trump said so literally, the American people didn't." You said sometimes you say something, don't have all the facts to back it up. But my question, shouldn't the media hold every presidential candidate accountable for his words?
Well, of course people are accountable for their words, Howie, but you have to remember, the American people understand the way Donald Trump is going to go and be a change agent in Washington. And when he talked about things, look, he talked about Carrier as an example. And what he said was, as an example, we're going to make sure that they don't ship their jobs to Mexico. And before he ever even has taken the oath of office to become the next president of the United States, he saved 1,100 jobs in Indiana from that Carrier plant that was going to move. Those are the types of things that he's going to do. He talked about that in the broader scale of saving American jobs. And what we saw was actually, literally, he saved those jobs.
But talk about it in terms of this word literally. You say the American people got it when Trump would kind of, some would say, shoot from the hip, and the media were like parsing every word. But it seems like it's another way of saying, well, he doesn't really have to be held accountable for his words, because if we call him on it, he can say, well, I was just using a figure of expression. I was just being sarcastic. I didn't really mean it.
No. What I'm saying is that when he was speaking about saving jobs in America, I don't know if he actually said, I'm going to go be able to save those Carrier jobs. He was using that as an example. The difference is we've seen Donald Trump in the 5 weeks since this election save 1,100 jobs in Indiana, do a deal with a foreign government where they're going to invest $50 billion and bring 50,000 new jobs here to our country. That's what he talked about. He talked about the grand scale of bringing those jobs back to America and making America first. So that's what he talked about, and that's what he's now delivering on.
So when all the press fact checkers and truth squatters would say, well, he said this and it's wrong, and this is contradicted by this other statement and so forth, do you think that didn't resonate because many people, including probably most people who voted for Trump, don't trust the media?
Well, look, if you look at the polls coming after this election, 97% of the people that were surveyed from MRC said that they didn't let the media bias weigh on their decision to vote for Donald Trump in this election. And I think it's been very clear, and there's been multiple studies on this, that the media was biased against Donald Trump, and he bypassed the mainstream media by his Twitter feed, by his rallies, by going directly to the American people and connecting with 30 million people and pushing that message out of what he wanted to do. That's what drives the mainstream media crazy, is that he can go right to the American people and tell it to them directly.
All right, let's talk about Dean Baquet, the executive editor of the New York Times. You said recently that by publishing a couple of years of Trump's tax returns during the campaign, that he, Baquet, had committed a felony against Trump, that this was egregious, and that he should go to jail. But the person who broke the law here, it's not Dean Baquet, it's whoever anonymously sent those tax returns to the New York Times.
Well, I agree with you, but as you know, Dean went to Harvard University and said he was willing to go to jail to publish Donald Trump's taxes. He was encouraging someone to break the law and used his perch at the head of the New York Times to say he was going to publish that information, knowing that it was going to be obtained illegally. Now, look, I don't think that's right. Donald Trump was a private citizen. As you know, he said many times that as soon as his audit was done, he was going to release his taxes. And that's the privilege of being a private citizen. And if Donald Trump wanted to release his taxes, he could have done that. But someone releasing his taxes without his permission, as you know, is a felony.
Well, we can debate whether being a presidential candidate is also the same as being a private citizen. But as you know, Corey, I mean, sometimes journalists publish confidential or classified information to expose wrongdoing or doing what they think is in the public interest. A lot of the public might or might not agree. When you talk about criminal penalties for journalists, that could have a chilling effect. Do you not see some value in the press digging up stuff and getting journalists getting their hands on material that's supposed to be secret?
Well, look, the question is, what in Donald Trump's taxes did we learn that was going to change the outcome of the election? Nothing. What we learned is that he's as rich as everyone knows he is, that he took advantage of the tax laws because the laws are so fundamentally flawed that he's going to go and change those so that people can't take that advantage anymore. There's nothing in there that was a material decision that was going to change the outcome of the election. So what I don't understand is there's a difference between publishing classified information that has a direct impact on the American people and publishing someone's taxes that doesn't materially change the outcome of an election.
All right. Now, you resigned as a CNN contributor the day after the election. Obviously, you may take an administration job. CNN took a lot of flack for hiring you, and it seemed like you'd be on these sort of 8-person panels, and most of the people would be beating up on you. On election night, Van Jones said you were a horrible person. What was it like being on those panels during your time at CNN?
Well, look, let me say I got a lot of friends at CNN, and I want to thank them for the opportunity to be able to defend Donald Trump during this presidential election cycle. But you know what it comes down to is I wanted to have the opportunity to be able to speak my mind anywhere I wanted. And look, there are good people who work at CNN, and my colleagues over there are good, honorable people. I just want to have the opportunity to spread a message about Donald Trump on as many networks as possible, and that's why I chose to resign from CNN.
Right. Did you ever feel, though, in many of those appearances, the deck was kind of stacked against you?
Look, I got broad shoulders, Howie. I think it's fair to say I've taken a lot of bullets this election cycle. Not as many as Donald Trump, but I've taken my fair share. So, you know, my shoulders are broad, and I think I can hold my own in any of those panels.
All right, you've got the scars to show for it. Now, finally, the election is over, and President-elect Trump has to go through the tough slog of governing. What does he gain from continuing these harsh tweets against CNN, for example, New York Times, NBC, even Vanity Fair, and its editor, Graydon Carter? I mean, he's settling scores, but how does that help him govern?
Well, look, it's not about governing. It's about, being honest with the American people. And what he has brought to light this election cycle is that there is a massive media bias. We've seen it. And what Donald Trump has said is, I'm not going to let people be untruthful about me and not counterpunch. I think it's a great opportunity where you've got someone who can go directly to the people to tell them the truth. It's something that no one's ever had the privilege of doing without calling a press conference.
Mm-hmm.
And, he can put out a tweet and it's the front page or it's the breaking news of any major network. It's an opportunity that didn't exist 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and he's used it to make sure that the truth is getting out, and that's important.
No question about it. But when you were running his campaign and many of those tweets would cause controversy, did you ever say, sir, you need to step away from the Twitter?
Look, that's not my job. Isn't to tell Donald Trump and wasn't to tell Donald Trump, what to tweet or what not to tweet, because, he's a grown man. But more importantly, he fundamentally understands what the American people are after. And when he talked about just recently not allowing the flag to be burned, I understand what the Supreme Court has said, but I also know that 80% of the American people agree with him on that, and he has his finger on the pulse of the American people, and has used Twitter to remind those people of where he stands on important positions. I think it's a great benefit to the candidate.
Corey Lewandowski, scars and all, thanks very much for joining us this Sunday.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Next on Media Buzz, the press piling on the president-elect over the CIA and Russia and his new Secretary of State. Is there a hostile tone to the coverage? And later, Politico fires a reporter for tweeting trash about Donald Trump and his daughter.